All right, great. Thanks for all coming. This is super exciting. It's really cool to see how everyone is interested in control center hacks. Like this seems like a very popular subject, which is fantastic. All right, we'll dive in with I'll just give a quick intro to DigitalRadius, my company, and then Brian will take it from there in terms of walking you through the 10 control center hacks we see all the time as a partner and helping you out with your own implementations and your own environments. So starting off, if we can do the slides. Oh no, I've got it, right. There we go. Oh right, of course, legal, yes, fun stuff. So we have to do the safe harbor, et cetera, and I'm not going to go through the detail. You've all seen it multiple times today, probably. Transform your workflows, control center hacks for immediate impact. And we're coming at this as a large Smartsheet partner. We do a ton of control center work and a ton of implementations. And what we've tried to put together here are a lot of the tips and tricks. We're kind of giving you a lot of the stuff we do as a professional services team and what we think can really help with control center deployments. Control center is the sort of huge enabler and value add in the Smartsheet ecosystem. It changes Smartsheet from sort of a credit card, basic level platform, which is still great, but taking control center turns it into an enterprise solution, and that we're really excited about what it can do. So today it'll be myself. I'm the founder and CEO of DigitalRadius. I've been doing DigitalRadius for 4 years, and I'll do a little background. And then Brian Connell, who's been with us for over 2 years and was our first Smartsheet hire. So he'll take over for me as we get into the actual technical side of this. We'll go through 4 sections today. I'll lead you through a quick intro to DR, power of control center, and then hand it off to Brian as we get into control center hacks, and then customer quote success story, and then I believe we have some time for a Q&A at the end of the session. All right, so DigitalRadius, we are one of the sponsors this year. We're one of the largest Smartsheet partners. We have over 10 dedicated Smartsheet experts and growing all the time. We've got new people starting over the next couple months and continue to grow. We have a lot of years of Smartsheet experience for a company that's been growing in terms of Smartsheet and growing in terms of DigitalRadius. We've built out a very strong team, deep bench in Smartsheet with a lot of experience focused on control center, enterprise deployments, and the more sort of complex end of the Smartsheet ecosystem. We do everything from very lightweight support contracts. Hey, we only do a 10-hour support contract. We want to do 50 hours a year, 50 hours a quarter, all the way up through very large complex builds. So we've built pre-built solutions based on control center. We built complex environments with control center, dynamic view, bridge, work app, shuttle, et cetera, all put together. And I got to give full credit to Brian. He's been one of our best architects behind a lot of that. This is the DigitalRadius team. So you'll see us, we're downstairs. We've got a booth, happily to swing by. We've got candy, all the good stuff. And across the team, I'd say we're based nationally. We're no home base specifically, but we support really all US, and then we also have work that now is happening ex-US, rest of world. All right, let's talk a little bit about control center. Whoa, I don't know why that's coming in and out like that. A little bit about control center and a little bit about why Smartsheet. So my background is enterprise systems. I built and ran the enterprise system stack for Moderna Therapeutics. I was there from about 100 headcount. I was the second employee in IT, up through a couple thousand people. And I built that stack and then went on to run and build enterprise systems for a range of other companies as a consultant or as an FTE. It's always a complicated environment. You've got a lot of tools that are your systems of record, these big platforms that you're paying for, that you already have, you're building around them, they're kind of pillars. And then you usually have a lot of gaps. There's a lot of issues within your environment. Things that you're filling these gaps often with email, Excel, quick workflows wherever you can find them. And what we've learned over time as architects focused on leveraging Smartsheet is that Smartsheet is not just a good tool to fix a lot of these problems. It's the best tool to fix many of these problems. And we get really excited looking at that sort of enterprise system stack and saying, where can we find the right gaps that Smartsheet fills, and where is it also, in some cases, by far the best system out there on the market? Certainly, we're going to talk a lot about project and portfolio management, right? I mean, that's a core use case. We see IT PMO, general PMO. We see enterprise sort of top-down, the strategic transformation projects. There's also a lot of other areas that we see Smartsheet and within Smartsheet Control Center as extremely powerful and helpful in deployments, where you're looking at how do I manage and maintain this sort of architecture, this deployment methodology, where instead of the traditional Smartsheet model, and believe me, I love Smartsheet, but I came from running enterprise systems, running the CIO side. My challenge on that side is, oh wow, there's Smartsheet everywhere and I don't have control over it, right? People are going to that top right corner and they're hitting share, oh, admin rights, yeah. And all of a sudden everyone has admin rights. And it's kind of terrifying. And this is where Control Center really starts to change that game, right? You can put in place this sort of top-down architecture, you can put in place these top-down sort of command and control environment. And you can say, hey, well, actually, every time you provision a project, you go to Control Center, or you go to the form, right? But what Control Center is doing on the back end is it's auto-provisioning all of these assets. It's creating consistency. It's creating standardization. And so then you get to start saying, well, instead of just using Smartsheet as sort of this ad hoc solution, we can put it in place for these more complex enterprise workflows, these more mission-critical workflows. So ITSM or time tracking, comp planning, performance goals, all of these things we need control around them, right? We can't just share admin rights. We can't let anyone just edit what they want to edit. We really need to have them in a state of control. As for Control Center is an incredibly powerful platform. It's a provisioning tool. It's an admin solution. It changes the game for Smartsheet, moving it from lightweight tools or better version, and we always hear this, right, as we come in as consultants. Oh, isn't Smartsheet kind of a better version of Microsoft Project Online or better version of Excel Online? Well, yeah, at a base license, that's probably a roughly comparable way to think of it. But as you move up, especially as you move up into the advanced tier of Smartsheet, it can really become a full service enterprise solution. And that's what we get excited about. We've built a series of pre-built solutions. So as a partner, this is kind of what we're known for. We've come out and said, hey, a lot of these have a lot of commonality between different use cases. It's actually super cool for me at this Engage, because Smartsheet as a company is now really focused on this concept of we need to talk about the solutions, what we can do to really provide the value, not just the toolkit, right? Smartsheet's amazing, but in some ways it's kind of that Lego set, right, without instructions. It's like when I was a kid, like they didn't give you like the crazy instructions you get now. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to give you those, how do you actually use this? How do you actually take these tools, these components, these Lego building blocks that you've been given and turn them into real value for your company? So we've built a predefined set of tools. We also work outside of that. If it's a custom development, if it's something that's net new, something we haven't done before, absolutely we can build it. But what we see is a lot of repetitive use cases, and then we've built an IP library to take advantage of that. And so what Brian's going to be diving into is within these tools, we have, as a partner doing a ton of deployments, we've seen a lot of things that come up again and again, and that within those issues, we've come up with a number of hacks to try to make your life easier and make Control Center more valuable. Why Control Center? What's the real value prop to Control Center? So to me, the number one thing, and again, I come from it running enterprise systems at scale, is governance, right? It's how do I take a platform that was traditionally used as sort of a shadow IT solution or a lightweight tool, and how do I move that? How do I bring it in from the cold, make it IT's best friend, make it something that we can leverage in an enterprise environment, mission critical type environment, and including where it may be the system of record, or where it may actually be the platform you're using and pointing to it and saying, hey, that is where our data lives, right? That is our system of record. And that's very different than sort of lightweight, who's on the softball team. That's still a great use case for Smartsheet. But another one, we just did a major deployment which integrated multiple ERP systems around the world and created a unified reporting solution for sales numbers across multiple ERP systems. That is a mission critical solution, right? It can't go down, it needs to be up 24/7. It's being used globally in a large organization. That's where Smartsheet can move into being this sort of extremely sort of central to your process, central to your IT stack, and you need Control Center for that. The second to me is data management, right? If you're really thinking of, again, tied to this like system of record, how critical is this information? You can't do that, go to the top right corner and share admin rights and just use business logic, right? Like we do this. Please don't break my sheet. Please don't change my template. Please do not break my formulas. And of course it happens, right? Of course it happens. And so that's not enough. You need more than that. You need Control Center to start to say, well, it's not business logic. It needs to be top down. It needs to be programmatic. We need to use it from a technology perspective. We need to be able to say, hey, we're not going to let you break this. And the last is scale. So if I'm running 2 projects, can I keep them maintained and organized? Yes, right? Even without Control Center, you can probably just go in there. Oh, I want to actually add the same column to those 2 projects. All right, go in and you can do that. When you start to hit 10, 20, 30, 50, 500, there's no way to do that without Control Center. That's what Control Center is for. So as you start to scale up the number of projects, programs, however you're defining sort of the assets that you're maintaining within Control Center, the blueprints that you're looking at, you need Control Center to go from, hey, we're doing a couple of these things, to, hey, we're doing this at scale. We're doing this in a very large environment. And so these 3 together really are, to me, the driving force of why Control Center. I've watching this for years. Moderna was the first large biotech or pharma company to implement Control Center as the PMO solution for clinical PMO, and I ran that project, I think it's 2017. Back then, Control Center didn't even have a back end. Smartsheet Professional Services had to do everything for you. And you fast forward to where we are today, it's an incredibly powerful platform. It's matured. It now can do many of the things that, like, way beyond what the older platforms, project, et cetera, can do. And then it can also integrate. It can be a data management tool. It can be a workflow engine. So super, super powerful platform. With that, I'm going to hand it off to Brian.
Hey, everyone. How's it going? Man, this room filled up. People on the floor? All right. Well, I guess everybody's interested in what we're going to talk about with Control Center. Quick show of hands. Does anyone have the Smartsheet app on their mobile device? Oh, that looks great. Can I get some assistance from the Smartsheet folks in the room in handing out some QR codes that I'm going to have the audience scan and bring up a form on their devices? Or somebody who can help me pass these out? Jess, Chance? Awesome. I have my colleagues here. They're going to help. So we have some QR codes. We're going to have this be something that you guys participate in today. So we'll try to pass these out as quickly as possible among the audience. And when you get a QR code, please feel free to share it with the person next to you. If there's someone you know or someone you'd like to get to know. There's only 5 right now per strip. So we're kind of going to take one, pass it down, and scan it on your mobile device. It will open a form. And when you get that form open, go ahead and click submit. That is all you are doing. You are clicking submit on the form because we're going to show off a particular hack with Control Center via this functionality of capturing your email address through the form. So Anders spoke about scale, right? Control Center is super valuable for that. It's a template factory. It takes something that you're repeating, whether it's projects or something else, and it spits it out 100, 200, 2,000 times, right? Scale's kind of a double-edged sword, though. Has anyone created some technical debt for themselves by provisioning a ton of projects, and then all of a sudden you realize, oh, I forgot to add that automation rule, or I forgot to include certain metrics in my summary roll-up? Yeah? It's painful, right? When you're trying to fix the solution, sometimes it feels like it's probably smarter just to rip and replace it and do an entire reprovisioning. Given that we have been working with Control Center for a long, long time, and personally, I've been deep in the sheets for over a decade now. So I started using Smartsheet in 2014, first as kind of a project management solution, and then as the product grew, so did my expertise with the tool, and Control Center came around, I think, 2017, 2018, right, where Smartsheet had released dashboards and kind of started packaging solutions as opposed to just an individual project plan. So we've been using Smartsheet myself daily for, I don't know, seven plus years. That's a lot of time in the tool, a lot of mistakes and learning experiences. So that's what we're looking to share with you today is kind of the benefit of our learnings and failures so that you can hopefully save yourself some time moving forward. Now, in terms of, when you do something and you realize you need to delete a project, does anyone know a recent change that Smartsheet made? I think it's probably been around for about a year now. What happens when you delete a project that did not happen originally in Control Center? Anyone got an answer for me? Something happens to your intake sheet, right? No, nobody?
Breaks the reference?
Doesn't break the reference. Yes, it deletes the row. So your intake record is gone. Now, if you're using a project intake form that people are submitting and you delete that project, how are you going to get that row back? What happens when a row is deleted? What do you lose? You lose cell history, you lose attachments and comments. Can't get those back, no matter what you're doing, right? So if you do the snapshot of the sheet request, it sends you an Excel file. It's not gonna have your cell history. Importing that data is going to create issues with like contact columns, right? Because it gives you a string value of somebody's name, and then you have to go in and clean it up. So there's a lot of kind of additional maintenance that comes around when you have to delete a project. Does anyone have a good idea for what we can do to avoid the pain of having to retrieve a previous version of our files or, export it like through a recurring backup? Any ideas? What's our first hack here? I think it's in the deck, but let's go ahead and switch over to our presentation. Oh, Craig.
Pull up that.
Oh, demo, there we go. All right. So this is the work app that you guys are going to get access to when you fill out that form, or at least. Let's try this one more time. Maybe it's my computer falling asleep.
On demo.
There we go. So our problem, when we delete projects, the corresponding row from that sheet is deleted, and we have prizes today. So when you answer questions, I'm a Seattle native. I love coffee. There's some great coffee here in Seattle. So for this lady who gave us the answer, here's a bag of beans for you. Hopefully that will encourage some responses on our next round of questions. We've got a grand prize, which is some blackberry syrup from Mount Rainier, you guys. So stay tuned. So in terms of how we resolve, how do we solve for this? So our row is going to get deleted when we need to delete a project. What we want to do is create kind of an intake record that is specifically used for Control Center, right? So we create a copy or a clone of our data and use that sheet specifically to provision projects. And that way, if you need to delete a project for whatever reason, you're just adding that row back to the intake sheet from wherever that source came. Now, there's a couple different ways to do that. So you can see here, my two favorites are either a copy row automation plus cross-sheet formulas so that you can keep your data in sync if you do not have data mesh, or data mesh. Additionally, if you don't want to use the copy row automation, which you may not want to because you may have row ID in your original sheet, and you may not want that in your Control Center intake sheet. So in that case, data mesh will allow you to still take that UID value and add it to your sheet without having that row ID column. So two different ways. It kind of depends on what it is you need to accomplish with restoring that row. So for example, if you have project charters attached in your intake sheet, and you're going to be passing those attachments down into your templates, then you're going to have to do the copy row automation. There's no way to use data mesh to keep those attachments and send it to another sheet, right? Well, I guess you can trigger the copy row automation through data mesh, but you can't use data mesh itself to add attachments to a row in another sheet. So copy row will allow you to keep those attachments and those comments. It is static at the point that that row is copied over. So if new attachments are added in your source sheet, or a new comment is posted, it's not going to go into that copied row. Data mesh is probably the best way to do it. So if you're not sending attachments into your templates, data mesh is great for a couple different reasons. It can send hyperlinks. Can't do that with cross-sheet formulas. So if you've got a work app link or something else that you need to pass down into your templates, data mesh will do that for you. Now, in terms of the implementation instructions, I'm not going to go through those step by step here. We're actually just going to show you how that works and what it looks like. But we do have this available for you so that when you fill out that form and click submit, you'll be able to review this and go through it on your own.
So we love everyone taking pictures of this, but you're actually going to get it. If you click through, you'll have access to this.
Yep. Now you can see I've added some notes here because I know you guys were thinking while you're saying, oh, well, there's other ways to get my data back. right? So I can do either data shuttle, I can do the sheet snapshot, I can have recurring backups, get it into Excel, or I can do a save as new on my sheet before I delete the project and then copy that row back. All of those require some additional cleanup of your data though. So even if you do a save as new, you gotta go in there and uncheck the provision checkbox, delete the hyperlinks that Control Center inserted there. So it's still kind of taxing, right? Data mesh allows us to automate that. So does a copy row automation where we can basically just check something to recreate it. So let's go ahead and delete some projects. Are you guys nervous? So we're gonna go into one of our configs, find some projects that we want to delete. Oh, look at all those user access that have been provisioned. We'll come back to that. So deleting our project from the config, let me go ahead and pull this up. And we'll take one of our projects. What should we grab? Maybe the 101, the first one. So we're gonna delete this from our sheet. You see here, it says it's gonna delete the row from the intake sheet as well as our summary sheet. So when we do that, that row is gone. What a copy row automation looks like is in our intake source data, so this is our source sheet for our records, you can see that we have two different copy row features. So one on the initial approval, as well as one that says kind of a manual trigger. So the initial trigger will send it to that provisioning sheet so that when a project is approved, it's gonna kick it off, right? That's what this rule here does, is it, on approval, sends that row to our SEC intake sheet for that intake record. But when we delete, we need to then replace it, and that's what this one does. So really, with the copy row automation, it's as simple as having a checkbox that you can come back in here and check and save and replace that row. So that will trigger that move row automation. You typically want to check and confirm via cross-sheet reference to make sure that that record is back in your intake sheet. And then the automation also comes back and clears that out so that you can then do it again on the next round, or at least when those rules run. Now, something that you will find with copy row and move row is that occasionally those rules will fail. And that's why I like data mesh as well. So again, if you're not needing to include attachments in your template, the best way to automatically replace rows when you delete projects that are approved and you need to re-provision is through a data mesh workflow. Now, data mesh is a premium product, meaning you got to license one of the advanced plans or purchase data mesh in addition to your Smartsheet licenses. And then what that looks like for our data mesh workflows is we have two of those. We have our 2.1 and 2.2. So one data mesh config to add the rows based on a unique identifier. This just creates a new row in our SEC intake sheet with the row ID in the row ID column. And then data mesh also has that feature of adding cell links, which I love because, like I said, you can pass hyperlinks, you can pass images, you can do things that you can't do through cross-sheet formulas. So this would then bring that data from our intake source record in our one project intake sheet and put it into that specific Control Center sheet that serves as our provisioning mechanism. Any questions on replacing rows in your intake sheet when you need to delete and then re-provision a project? All right, pretty simple. Has anyone run into that issue before where they had to then go retrieve the data, re-add the attachments, do any of that? No? Someone. It happens. That's our first hack. Now let's go into our second hack. So for our second hack, let's go back to our work app here. We've got an admin delete feature. Have you ever created a series of templates and found out that you had some rows in there that you didn't want? Maybe you had some dummy data, maybe it was a previous project plan. Some rows are in there and you need to get rid of them. Sometimes it's in your profile sheet, right? Or your summary rollup. You need to kind of remove rows, but you have this problem, right? We're talking about scale. You've provisioned 200 projects. You have 200 project plans. You got 200 project rate logs. You got 200 whatever. So you got to go to all these different places and delete those rows individually. Why? You can't delete rows from a report. You can only delete rows from a sheet. So rather than having to go into 200 sheets individually, we recommend using a move row automation triggered by a checkbox to centralize all those rows that are quote unquote to be deleted, meaning you need to delete them, but they are not deleted yet, into a single sheet. And then you can delete those manually in that one place through a bulk action. You can also automate the deletion through Data Shuttle by feeding a blank Excel file into it and using the replace feature in Data Shuttle. That will wipe out all the data in that sheet. Now, why would we need to clear out that sheet? If we are grouping all the rows that we need to delete across 200 sheets in a single sheet, what might we run into in terms of problems? Someone said it, I heard it over here. Cell limits, right? We're talking about sheet size. So now all of a sudden we've got, 10 rows on 200 sheets that we need to delete. That's 2,000 rows. What if we find another 2,000 tomorrow? We're adding up the number of rows in that sheet. So you got to keep that sheet clean. And what we recommend for this, again, is Data Shuttle to automate that. But also when you're building out your templates, you need to ensure that you are configuring those automation rules to move those rows into those repositories. So what that looks like in Smartsheet is that we've got a series of sheets tied to our blueprint. So for example, in our admin delete, we've got a sheet for the project plan rows, a sheet for the project team rows, a sheet for the RAID log, a sheet for the budget, a sheet for the metadata, meaning we've got 5 different sheets here, each that can contain 20,000 rows and allows us a lot of bandwidth to be able to remove things in bulk from the sheets that we have provisioned. What does this look like in practice? Let's go ahead and do it. So we've got a report here called To Be Deleted. And this is a bunch of rows that we have filtered for across our RAID logs. We had some bad data in our RAID logs and we provisioned a bunch of projects. So you can see here, in this scenario, we have 23 projects provisioned, but in your world, you might have 500. We've got customers with thousands of records that they've created through Control Center. So these are the type of things that will take you all day, all week to do if you have to do it manually and go into each sheet and delete those rows. You may have to, create a filter in the sheet. It's really painful. So again, using a move row automation based off a checkbox, we can take these first, 10 rows. We'll save with that admin delete checked. And where are those going to go? Based on that rule, they're going to fall out of our report and go into our admin delete box. So now we go into admin delete for our RAID log. Or at least we will find out what is going on with our automations. So automation, admin delete. When checked, move to admin delete RAID log. Again, move rows can occasionally fail. Now, if it fails, we have a second automation rule that will come behind us nightly and at 12 a.m. in the morning, at which time I'm generally still working. It will try to eliminate those rows again for us and move it into that admin delete repository. Now let's try this one more time and just see if it works for us. So again, to be deleted report. We've got a lot of rows that we want to get rid of. We're checking the box to try to trigger that rule to say, hey, Smartsheet, go ahead and move these rows out of our RAID log that we do not want and move those into our RAID log admin delete repository. We'll see if on a refresh we get to see these disappear. That's always satisfying when it happens. Not yet. Maybe we'll have to wait till midnight. You guys have time? What's that? The coffee? Yeah, we'll brew some. We'll go ahead and grind these beans up. Sometimes the move row automations take a couple minutes. We'll come back and check that in a moment, but that is typically how we would do that. Again, that allows you to basically purge the data from your sheets that you don't want in there. And that is pretty handy to be able to do when you've provisioned, again, hundreds of items and you don't want to have to go into those individual sheets to delete everything. Now you can see here, it is advisable to lock and hide this column. Why? Because you don't want other people accidentally checking that box and canning stuff out of their project plan that they didn't really mean to remove. You can always obviously move those rows back into the sheet, but then you've got to service somebody's support request, right? Now having many admin delete repositories, like I said, is advisable because of sheet limits. So when we are creating tons of records with tons of child rows in these templates, you're gonna run out of space in those admin delete repositories very quickly. That's why you wanna expand, the number of admin delete sheets that you have, and also that way you limit the number of columns to exactly what's required when those rows get moved. Because if you do move, rows from 5 different templates all into the same sheet repository, what's gonna happen with the columns? What's that? Correct. It merges the columns. So if we've got 5 different templates, each of them has 20 unique columns, we've got 100 columns in that admin delete repository now. Again, that's going to make us hit our cell limit size quicker than if we had just limited to just the columns, the 20 from each of those sheets, which then gives us plenty of bandwidth to hit our 20,000 row max, right? So again, that's the best way to configure those admin delete repositories is make sure you have one for each template for which you would like to delete those rows from. Now, like I said here, with Data Shuttle, that can automate the deletion of those rows. If you do not have Data Shuttle, it is advisable to go into that repository after you finish the action you just saw me take with checking that box to go delete those rows from the centralized sheet where you can do it all at once. Let's see if our automation rule has run. Okay, look at that, you guys. It took a couple minutes, but those rows are gone. Where did they land? Well, if our automation rule worked correctly, you can see all of those rows here. Round of applause for a automation rule that worked. All right, so now rather than going to all of those sheets separately to delete these rows, we're going to delete them here, save it, and we've purged our repository. We're ready to start bulk deleting stuff again. Now, we'll just go ahead and take a shot at doing all of these at once and see if we can overwhelm the Smartsheet backend. Don't worry, everything will be perfect in the future. Just you wait. Famous line from software salespeople, right? All right. Next one, any questions on admin delete before we move to hack number 3? Yes? Right, you need to create the automation rules, right? One of the things that Control Center can't do through global updates, which pains me to death, and I spoke to, I believe his name is Gihan yesterday about it, is that you cannot send out new automation rules via global update, right? So there's no way for us to insert an admin delete rule after the fact. We provisioned our 200 projects. If we didn't create that rule to begin with, we can't create it now. So it is advisable, of course, to create those rules before you start provisioning projects, along with any other kind of standard automation rules that you may want to run. A lot of people use the record today feature on a daily basis to ensure that their sheets stay fresh, right? So your formulas resolve and update with the new calculations that you're doing against date-based data. So you want to make sure that all of those are included ahead of time, because if you do come up with a whole bunch of new automation rules that you're really excited about and you want to deploy to your teams, you're going to have to either do it on a go-forward basis only, or you're going to have to rip and replace. Those are the facts. There's no way currently to send out an automation rule via global update. What's another? Yes?
What about other updates? As it seems like once you launch a set of templates and you roll them out in Control Center, it's inevitable that you're going to want to do continuous improvement and you're going to make changes that Control Center can't roll out.
It cannot do automation rules. What's another thing that it can't do? There's 2 more big ones in my mind. Cell linking, yeah, it can't do that, right? You can't say, okay, take a cell link from my project plan and link it into another sheet in my template. Absolutely. You still could potentially reference that data through formula and index match it into those other sheets. But what are looking for 2 specific things that we cannot update via global updates, and there's a bag of coffee tied to this. No, you can update dashboard widgets.
New references.
Yes, that's one. Cross-sheet references, excellent. Can't add cross-sheet references after the fact. You got to make sure you've created them in those sheets before you deploy. You can create those through the API, so that is something that can be done pretty easily. There's one other big one. Who here takes the appearance of their sheet very seriously? Do you want your sheets to look good? You can add sheet summary through the API. You cannot do it, I don't think, through Control Center. That's correct. I'm sorry, I wasn't thinking of that one, though. In terms of appearance, what can't we send?
Conditional formatting.
In the back, conditional formatting. Oh, man. So, when you want your sheets to look a certain way, you've got hierarchy in your project plan, and you want the first nesting underneath the parent to look one color, and then the next one under that to look another. If you didn't create those rules beforehand, or if you need to change them because your team said, ooh, that's ugly, bad news. Again, you got to rip and replace. Rip and replace is painful. Has anyone done that? Yeah, we've got some people who've done the rip and replace. Migrating data, right? That's what you got to do. You got to copy rows from your old templates into your new ones.
Two automations for every automation?
Sometimes. Not always, but sometimes. What's that? You can't do filters as well. I am going to save our remaining bags for some other questions that we've got coming. But I do appreciate the sheet summary, the filters. Sheet references was another one. Yeah, sheet references is a big one. Sheet summary and cross-sheet references are easy to do in the API. If you're not using the API yet, but you're a Control Center expert, you should really think about that, which is our fifth hack. Any other questions on the admin delete feature and global updates? Let's talk about global updates a little bit. So summary SMORE. Have you ever provisioned projects and then realized, oh, I forgot to calculate the number of late tasks or the number of risks on my RAID log or another metric? How do you add rows to that summary roll-up sheet? That's a challenge, right? If those rows don't already exist, you got to go into 200 individual sheets again, add rows, create the formulas, and do it, right? But there is a hack for this one. So it is very easy for us to add a new summary row kind of by using the add profile data in a way that it's not really intended. So let's go ahead and show that off. What we're going to do is come up with a new value that we want to add to our summary rollup sheet in our templates. We'll add it to our intake sheet. We'll send it through a global update with profile as a one-time write, which will create the row. And then you can come behind that and you can do a find and replace to add the formula. So let's go ahead and do that with a test column. So we're going to say that this can be kind of any metric that your heart desires. So we're going to add a new column here, call it test. We'll capitalize it because my mom's a teacher. Or was. She's retired now. All right, what does this look like in Control Center? Global update time. So we go to the program that we want. Manage program, global updates, new updates. And we're going to add profile data. We've got our project toolkit. We're going to select that test column that we just added to the intake sheet. Whoops, I added it to the source as opposed to our mesh sheet. Let's add it here. All right, so now that we have added it there, let's go ahead and do our update. I think I'm gonna cancel out of here and make sure it will recognize the columns that I've added. All right, project toolkits. We should see test here. There's our new column. We want to send it to our roll-up sheet. or summary sheet is sometimes what that's called. But that's the place where we're doing calculations of what we want to bring back out of our templates and roll up to our project, blueprint summary sheet. Now here's the critical part here. Instead of doing a cell link, we want to do a one-time write. There's no values in there. It's not going to put any data into that field. But what it does allow us to do, which is critical, I've got a laser pointer. Those things, mainly the middle one, it's going to add this profile to our summary sheets, which means we don't have to go in and click update reporting 200 times. Have you ever gotten carpal tunnel clicking update reporting 200 or more times? I have. People on my team have. So this is a major time saver. It's 2 global updates. It's not going to take as long as going into 200 sheets and doing this over and over. So we apply the test. I left my trackball at home today, so it's a struggle. I'm one of those few trackball users. We can see here in our roll-up sheet that the test row has been added. So it's there at the bottom. We've created a new row in that sheet without having to go into it. And now we're going to do it across all of those sheets rather than having to go into each and every one. And remember, you can do multiple profile data fields at the same time, right? So you could add 5, you could add 10, you could add 20, all in this single update across all of your project sheets. Now again, we are doing this as a one-time write so that there is not a inbound cell link from our intake sheet. We don't want that. We want to then come behind and use a find and replace to add our real formula in to do our calculations. So we'll go ahead and let that run, but we'll tee up our second global update to do this once that finishes. It's going to be exciting when we can do global updates concurrently, right? Lots of exciting stuff coming down the pipe. All right, so global updates. New update, find and replace. We're going to use our project toolkit. We're going to do it in our roll-up sheet. We're going to say that it is blank. And we need to restrict to, let's see. Primary column is equal to test. So we're only going to update in the profile data only where the primary column is test, and we're going to replace this blank cell with hello world. This one's still running. We'll see if this one's able to complete. It's not in that one, but that's fine. We'll go ahead and leave it here for a second while that finishes up on the other global updates. Looks like we have done it for 10:14, 10:12, and 10:05. (10:14, 10:12, and 10:05, the first 3. All right, so we'll work on these 3 because they already have that test row. And what we're hoping to see when we open up this 10:12 sheet is we've got hello world in our roll-up template. There it is. Round of applause for two global updates working. All right. Now, where does that go? It goes into our summary roll-up sheet, because remember, we didn't want to have to click update reporting on 200 projects 200 times to get new cell links in our summary roll-up, right? So this is how you avoid that issue of having to update reporting over and over and over on all of your projects. And in your portfolio summary roll-up, we've got some hello worlds in here. So that is how you can quickly add summary roll-up data to your blueprint summary sheets. Any questions on that hack? Yes?
In that top bottom view there,
Oh, in terms of where that row places? No, you can't dictate where it's going to place it. It's going to stick it at the very bottom of all the nested rows under the summary parent row. Why do you need it somewhere else?
I would be new to Control Center. I'm thinking in the sense of if you have project schedules over across different teams, and let's say you wanted to add a new discovery phase into those schedules, and that thing went across the board.
This is less about adding a phase to a project plan and more so about managing the metadata on both the intake, right, the profile data, and then the blueprint summary data, which again comes back into a blueprint summary sheet like this, which is one row per project. What you're talking about is adding rows to a project plan across many projects. And you can do a copy row from a single sheet into many sheets. You can automate that as well if you have a list of sheet IDs through the API. There's a few different ways to approach that, but a little bit different in terms of what you're trying to do versus what we just displayed. Any other questions? All right, guys, let's keep on hacking away. Hack number 4. This is probably why you're here, right? Does anyone have multi-tier? What do you hate about multi-tier? Nothing? All good? It can be a challenge, right? You're using multi-tier because you have a ton of data. You need to segment it into buckets, whether it's department, whether it's program, whether it's customer. You've got a tier 1 item that then you're gonna tier child records under. So for example, client and projects, program and projects, department program projects, some sort of hierarchical data model that you need to structure that data into a multi-tier structure. Does anyone in here love work apps? PDA for PWA? Yeah? We love work apps. I think Smartsheet can be hard for a lot of people, right? Who aren't, tech savvy or kind of experienced with Excel or Smartsheet in general. Work apps is awesome for kind of giving them an easy, concise view. Just share what they need. Don't give them any kind of access to workspaces. They get lost, right? Work apps is great. But in multi-tier, it's a challenge. Why? Because only that top tier item is going to get a project work app. So in the case of clients with projects, your clients can get a set of client templates in a work app, but you don't have that project work app underneath it because it's tiered. But there is a workaround or a hack. It's to create a duplicate blueprint. So again, 2 automations, 2 blueprints. We just do twice the work for twice the fun. In this case, in our set of blueprints, what you'll see is we have our department as our tier 1. We have our project toolkit as our kind of standalone blueprint. And then we have a tiered project blueprint. And this is just to get the data to feed through the multi-tier scenario and map it to that department project summary sheet. So what does that template look like for what I'm describing here? For a tiered project where we're just passing a row, just passing a row's data. Does it have a project plan? Does it have a project dashboard? Does it have a project RAID log? No. That blueprint is real simple and pared down. That blueprint is just a transposed version of the metadata. So it is a single sheet. It is a metadata sheet. And what that allows you to do is when you tier this, is it will create that row, in this case in our department summary, as opposed to our portfolio summary, right? So it's gonna tier it where it needs to go. We still get the benefit of having that project work app. So for example, in our portfolio work app then, what that looks like is we've got work app links for both tiers. We've got our department work apps and we've got our project work apps. So again, creating both of these essentially as standalone blueprints, but then taking the metadata from the project and tiering that. So that will allow you to create project work apps for all your tiers while still getting the data where it needs to go from the tiering mechanism, right? So now your departments will have all their projects listed on their project summaries. Your clients will have all their projects listed on their project summaries. but your team can still work in the work app. They can go into the project plan, they can go into the dashboard, they can have their different roles. You can still use the benefits and functionality of work apps so that when you click and open that project, you can see it's still got all those assets, it's still got my roles. But if I want to go to the department that this is tied to, I can use the department work app to see whatever those assets may be. So this was an IT project, meaning IT is still going to have their own blueprint with their own department summary dashboard and their own weekly update of projects that are in their portfolio, their own unique project intake, but still anything that comes out of this can then be created for its own project work app so that you have that, what you just saw with the toolkit at the project level still being available to you. Now, if you do not do it this way, what that means is you're not going to have the project work app. You're going to have the department work app, but you're going to have to go into native Smartsheet to update the project plan. So again, this is something that allows us to receive the benefits of tiering doesn't seem like it wants to let me out of IT here. Let's try backing out. So benefits of tiering, but without the downfalls. So in this case, again, still allowing for a tier 1 work app and a tier 2 work app because we did not create these as a tier 2. We are just tiering the metadata itself so that that summary row goes to those individual department summary sheets. Any questions on that? That's something we're currently doing with a number of customers. One of them is a client and then client project, tier 1, tier 2. Another one, again, is client and then basically modules. So with an HR services company that we work for, they've got their 600 clients as the top tier blueprint. And then they've got 11 different service offerings that they provide to these customers that each has its own blueprint. So again, we have to duplicate those blueprints. So really they have one blueprint for the client, and then they have 11 blueprints for the services, and they have 11 metadata blueprints to map those rows from the services that they offer into those client toolkits. So it can be done. Again, it's duplicative work in some respects, right? You're gonna have to have that second blueprint, but it will enable you to get those rows where they need to go in your data model and your architecture. Any questions on multi-tier for portfolio work apps? All right, we got some final things, and then we'll try to give away some more coffee. So API, what can you do with the API? I am not a software developer. I'm a sociology major. I majored in humanities. I'm a nerd though. Like I used to memorize the back of baseball cards. It's really weird. But I'm good with numbers, good with data. So I had somebody who kind of mentored me along the way, taught me how to work in Excel. And then in 2014, like I said, I learned Smartsheet. But I've never been a software developer, never written code, don't know any programming languages, until Control Center frustrated me enough and sunk enough of my time with having to rip and replace and reprovision things that I decided I needed to learn the Smartsheet Python SDK, right? So self-taught, but I've written a bunch of scripts. We use them with our customers. It allows for some amazing bulk actions that currently you can't do in Control Center. So two of those that came up during our discussion were sheet summary. You can add sheet summary fields. You can update them really easily, include formulas, and adding cross-sheet references. Huge time savers. You can also do bulk column updates. When you've got 600, 700 sheets provisioned, how long does a column update, global update take to process? Anyone got a guess? A couple hours, right? Like you're sitting there and again, you can't run them concurrently. So if you need to update 5 columns across 600 clients, that might take all day. You're gonna kick off a job, you're gonna wait for 2 hours and then come back. With the API, it's faster. It's a bit more reliable. when you see global updates in Smartsheet, sometimes the first pass it'll have fails, especially if you're running multiple global updates at the same time. You kind of overwhelm the Smartsheet API, and it will time out or fail on some of those if you're running them concurrently. It's just too much going on in Control Center. Again, the plan is for that to be something that they enhance, but with the API, it runs faster. You get success, I'd say 99.5% of the time, whereas you might see a few things fail when you run a global update, right? It happens. The API is really good at being consistent and speedy. Adding and updating cross-sheet references, like we said, summary fields, bulk publishing. I think publishing is probably one of the most underrated features in Smartsheet, right? Because it makes it really easy to share a dashboard, a report, a sheet. But it's kind of a pain, again, if you have 200 project dashboards. Who wants to go into 200 dashboards and click around in the UI and go publish them and then copy the link and paste it into a cell and then clean up the link so that it looks good and it's not just raw URL? Brutal, right? So the API allows you to bulk publish those things. Again, each dashboard, each report has an ID. And so you get a list of those IDs and you run the job to bulk publish those. And then you can also transform those URLs into what I like to call clean links, meaning you're going to use the project name or the project code as the display value for that link, but it's still got the correct hyperlink behind it. That takes all day to do, if you're going through a list of things in a sheet, doing it yourself manually. Whereas in the API, it's probably like a 5-minute job, on a huge list. Did you have a question? What's the API? So in miscellaneous here, I don't know how, I'm not a software developer, but it's like, there are certain things that Smartsheet, the core application or Control Center can't do. And the API basically allows you to do these things in bulk. In many cases, you still can't do like conditional formatting or automation rules. But for the things that we're talking about, it's a huge value add because again, in Control Center, for those number 2 and 3 things, that comes up all the time, but there's no global update for those items. So the, it's basically the back end of Smartsheet. So it's the application programming interface, I think is what? Yeah? Any software devs in the audience? I'm good on the terminology. But so what we do is we feed instructions to it. And it receives those instructions from us and then makes the changes for us as if we were doing it ourselves as a user in the application. So we're feeding data and then it's processing that and making changes for us in Smartsheet. And what that toolkit looks like for us, there's a few different ways to approach this, but we have basically built a set of tools in Smartsheet to do those things. So for columns, it's all the metadata, right? The sheet ID, the column ID, you can update the title with a string, you can add descriptions. You can add descriptions to columns in bulk, pretty nice. Update the index, so where it appears in the sheet. The types are dropdowns. So in this toolkit, this way I don't make mistakes. I don't miskey what type of column I want. I've just added a pick list with the metadata values for Smartsheet columns. For symbols, same thing. You've got metadata here for the different types of symbols. And so I will construct these sheets with the instructions that I want to feed the Smartsheet API, process the job, and then it makes the updates for me and returns in the result field. It comes back and it says success when it's finished with a particular set of instructions on a given row, or if it fails, it says error. And then I know what worked and what didn't. Another thing, like I said, is sheet summary. So that looks very similar to column updates. The metadata, behind a sheet summary field and a column in your sheet is very similar. It's got a type, so a pick list or a text number or a symbol. It's got a title. It may have a formula. The index is where it's placed either in the sheet or in the sheet summary. So these two sheets are very similar. For cross-sheet references, what do we need to know to create a new cross-sheet reference? We need to know what sheet we're going to. So there is a source sheet ID. We need to know what column we're pointing at. So a start column ID and an end column ID. And sometimes those are the same thing because you're only referencing a single column. But sometimes you're referencing a range, so it's the first column and then the last column in that range. And so then you feed those in and you give it a name, right? The same way that if you were to go try to create a new cross-sheet reference, you'd be doing the exact same steps, but in the UI, the user interface, as opposed to the API, which is us just feeding data to Smartsheet and saying, hey, go do this, through the magic of robots. But this is basically the same process, is we pick a sheet, so that's our source sheet ID. We pick a column or a set of columns. So in this case, if I want a range, I can pick 3 columns that would have a start column ID of the result ID and a end column ID of the column ID column. So different ways to kind of leverage Smartsheet to basically feed it to itself and enhance what you're able to do. Honestly, this has been a huge time saver for us with projects where people are gung-ho to start provisioning and working in Control Center, but then we find things that needed to be added after the fact. This is huge. And if you do end up doing a rip and replace, there is a copy row automation that can do 500 rows at a time. We ran a job over a weekend for a company down in Florida that was doing like COVID claim processing. So ton of data during the pandemic, right? A lot of people had COVID, I heard. We moved 1 million rows over a weekend for them through a script. So I didn't go in and copy those rows or move them myself. I just kicked off the job and let it run and went out and enjoyed myself. So that is what I would recommend, is if you are pretty savvy with Smartsheet, try to take it to the next level. It's not the hardest thing in the world to do. I have included some resources for you that I have used. When I go to GitHub, I get lost. It's not my language. So in terms of what I do use, the things that I use the most are the Smartsheet API reference. So when you're trying to figure out, how you're going to call out and update cross-sheet references, it has methods here, right? So you can get them, you can list them, you can then add or update them.
We had a wrap.
Yeah. And then you've got some other resources here as well, the developer portal, Python downloads. ChatGPT is awesome as well. So I use that to review my code. It's not perfect, but it'll get you like 50% of the way there. And then, just hack it, right? But that's what I would recommend, is just take it to the next level for yourselves. Try to stretch the boundaries of what you're able to do. Again, I'm a sociology major, and I don't know. I play around with the Smartsheet API. So thank you guys for your time. Last thing, when you guys submitted that form, what you will have seen is that you got a notification that let you know that you are shared to our work app that you just saw me go through with all that information about our hacks. And so we've got a bunch of people who have signed up for that. That's really the last secret hack, is that work apps can be used to auto-provision access for people. So we use work apps in a lot of cases as a customer-facing portal and automate the access so people don't have to go add them to a group or share them to a role. You guys all clicked submit through the form, and you've all got access. I was sitting up here talking and sweating this whole time. So it was not me. But that's another feature and a fun one to kind of play around with. And we again use all of these hacks with our current customers.
Can you lay that hack out, like how you manage that through there?
Yeah. I know we're over time. We'll go ahead and show you guys how this one works. So in this case, it is, again,
Hey, Brian, I think we should pause for a second to say thank you for anyone who wants to head out, but we'll stick around and answer questions, but thank you.
We're in room 420. We're going to get deep in the weeds, you guys.